Joe, let me know when we're live, if you would.
We're live. We're live.
We're live. Excellent. We are live here today. Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, Greg and AJ.
Hey there.
This is a special day for us. We're here with Gregg Garfield and his girlfriend AJ, and it's special for us not just because Greg happens to be a buddy of ours that goes back a number of years, but it's special for us because based upon medical probabilities, there's really no reason for him to be on this call. So the very fact that he's able to join us this afternoon is special for us, and it's really special for us to have the opportunity to share his story and what he and AJ and the other people in his community went through during his ordeal. Just a quick little bit of background about Greg. Greg is an entrepreneur. He is a business owner, a longtime business owner. He is, I want to use the term expert skier because I feel like avid skier doesn't quite do you justice. But he is a quite accomplished on the slopes, we'll put it that way.
Anytime you outrun an avalanche, you get expert status.
That's right.
You get expert status right off the bat.
That's right.
Greg clearly has multiple lives. And dog lover, member of the community, all around good guy. So Greg, we're really happy to have you here today. But the other thing that Greg is, which is a new title that he can add to his resume, is survivor of COVID-19 after 64 days in the ICU. So Greg, I just kind of want to toss it over to you right away. And people have probably, at this point, they may have had the chance to see you on the Ellen Show and see you on the news. And I know that you just recently completed a podcast with the folks over at The Only One in the Room, Laura Cathcart-Robbins and Scotty Slaughter, who are, members of the arena community and people that we love very dearly. So I'm sure people will be excited to see you on The Only One in the Room as well. But, I guess we'll kind of set the stage here. Greg, if you can kind of just give us a synopsis of what you went through, and then we can kind of tease it apart and take a look at each piece of it in detail. But give us a little background about what your ordeal was like over the last few months.
Well, first of all, we started off on my annual European ski trip, and there was 13 guys this particular year. We ended up in Val Gardena, Italy, and on the trip, a couple days into the trip, I got a call from AJ, and she said, "Are you aware that the coronavirus is in northern Italy?" And she goes, "Where exactly are you?" And I said, "Northern Italy." And so I kind of pushed it off a little bit, being the fact that nobody was sick around me. We're outdoors. It's in a ski resort. And really didn't take it too seriously. Little did I know, all 13 of us contracted COVID. It was probably contracted in the gondola, where that was the only place we were elbow to elbow with 50 plus people. 3 days into the skiing, I ended up with flu-like symptoms, coughs, fever, just a cold / flu. And I took 3 days off skiing because I was planning on a trip 4 days from when I got back that was supposed to be a helicopter skiing trip. And I hopped a plane a couple days later to head back to LA. One of the guys ended up staying back the night before we left. He checked into the hospital with pneumonia. Ended up, when we were on the plane, ended up having a text message saying he was COVID positive. Quarantined myself when I got home. Ended up calling my doctor, who called the CDC, who ended up sending a van out with the hazmat guy, taking me to their office out in the North Valley. 24 hours later, I came down with COVID. I was, what's the phrase, what the word I'm looking for? I was,
You were
brain fart.
sorry, I don't know. You're
I was COVID positive.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
positive. Mhm.
So
And
I
correct
then
me if I'm
ended up
wrong, Greg.
quarantining what's that?
Correct me if I'm wrong too. You had difficulty getting into a hospital when you first got in, didn't you?
Well, I'll jump ahead on that first with that.
You're
What
sure.
had happened was when I had gotten back and I had tested positive for COVID, and I quarantined myself, AJ wasn't allowed to see me. So 3 days in, I was home on the 1st. On the 4th, I was getting really serious as far as not shortness of breath, the fever spikes, coughing profusely. And one of my buddies ended up on the phone with me and conference called one of our doctor buddies. And he was just in my grill about going to the hospital. And then he called around to see which hospital was okay for me and ready for me. Being so early on in the COVID crisis, no hospitals were going to take me. USC, UCLA, St. John's in Santa Monica, Cedars, and St. Joe's in Burbank, which fortunately was 10 minutes away from my house in Studio City, was greenlit. And so I pushed my friend John off and said, you know, if I get worse later tonight, I'll call you. So I ended up, you know, I took the time to actually get my dog taken care of. And I called around with my housekeeper and my dog trainer, and nobody would take the dog because she was exposed to me with COVID. And I then, about 3 or 4 in the morning, I ended up calling John and said, green light, I'm going to go to the hospital. So he called over to St. John's and arranged the admittance, had a joint call with me to talk to the ambulance. And you're getting them prepared for, full hazmat gear and the whole thing. And my dog's crate trained. So I put my dog in her crate and just said, with tears in my eyes, girl, I'll get you out of here. And I cry about this every single time. I got in the ambulance. I called AJ and I said, we got to get her out of there. So we called the hospital. We called the police department, the fire department, animal control, our vet. And, nobody would really take the liability of coming into my house, being that I was here for 4 days. Mm-hmm. And AJ took it upon herself to come in. She went to the hospital and got hazmat gear, got 2 hours of hazmat training, came in, extracted the dog, went into the backyard, shampooed her with special shampoo. And then when she went to leave, found out that she was locked in the backyard. So she, based on the athletic ability that she has, she scaled a 10-foot fence in hazmat gear looking like a minion.
Okay, hang on for a second. Greg, we no longer want to talk to you. AJ, you are now the star of the show. I did not know that part.
Yes.
When you and I talked, I didn't know that part. AJ, that is amazing. That is
their major dog. Their major dog.
We are rabid dog lovers, and so I understand your pain, Greg, and your trepidation around everything. And AJ, I would have scaled that fence too. So kudos to you. Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. What happened then?
So I went over to the hospital. I was patient 0 at the hospital. AJ actually saw me in ICU. When she came to the hospital, she peeked in the window, and I was in an inflow room, and she couldn't see me face to face, but was looked through the window and waved. And really, that was kind of the last time that I recalled seeing her, being the fact that 2 days later, I was intubated and put on a vent. So that kind of really, from that point on, is AJ's story and my sister. Yeah. Because I was out for 31 days, man. I took a nap. And the whole trepidations of what I went through was experienced between AJ, my sister, and all of you guys that got 2 to 3 updates a day in that roller coaster ride of what AJ did.
Wow. So AJ, from your perspective, when was your holy shit moment? Like, oh my God, like this is for real and this is going down?
You know, I think that my holy shit moment, there wasn't one in particular. I think that it was a gradual, really strange progression of what had happened, because this is something that we really didn't know anything about. So when Gregg got home and tested positive, well, when he got home and told me that everyone had kind of thought that they had corona, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going over there because we don't know what this is, but I'm definitely not going to put either of us in risk, especially if he didn't know yet that he had it. But then him getting tested, him going to the hospital, it was like this thing was getting progressively worse, but we didn't know what it was. Yeah. So the last thing I'm thinking is that he's going to be in ICU. The last thing I'm thinking is that he's going to be fighting for his life. So every installment was something that was like, okay, I guess we're doing that. Okay. And at the time, I didn't know what being intubated meant. I didn't know what the risk factors were. I didn't know what the statistics were. So when he was being intubated, he literally texted me and said, or no, you called me and you said, sweetheart, I have to be intubated. I'm going to be offline for a couple days. And wow. I'm going, okay, they're doing this right now? Yeah. And I went, okay, love you. And even when he said that I saw him in the hospital and waved, I was crying when we waved at each other because it was this scary thing, but I didn't understand it. I couldn't go in and see him. So it was just this real interesting flow of like, what the heck is this? It wasn't until we were told he was on life support. I didn't realize too that being intubated on a ventilator meant life support. I think that was probably the moment that I went, oh my God, what is this?
And prior to me getting intubated, I looked at the ICU nurse and literally said to her, because I was fearful of my life, and said, I don't want to die. And she literally committed to me, you know, that was crazy for her. And she said, I won't let you die.
And she held that with her for a long time. She actually told Stephanie and I at one point, while he was on life support for probably 10 or 11 days, she said, I have to tell you guys, I promised him something. And I am just as invested as you guys are. I can't let him die. He looked at me and I was the last person that he talked to. And she carried that on her heart, you know, for quite a while. So I think now she's in a much better place when she found out he was turning around.
And wow. She and the whole team at St. Joseph's kept that promise.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm of the belief I would not have survived anywhere else.
Yeah.
Simply because the attention they gave me for 7 days, the first 7 days, I was the only COVID patient in the hospital.
Yeah.
And we were still allowed to go in at that time. So I was able to see him when he was on life support one time, which was very emotional. It was a very scary thing to see. At the same time, he almost looked peaceful, and I still didn't understand what it all meant. And then we had to have a meeting with the doctors I'll never forget, it was March 11th. And we had a meeting with the doctors and the head nurses and the ICU people who had basically had the conversation with us that it's really bad. And we don't know, he's on 100% of the ventilator right now. And if he's maxing the ventilator, you know, there's only one other option. It's called ECMO, which is an iron lung. And that is kind of your last option when you're dealing with your lungs on life support. So we understood. And so it seems, you know, not being a doctor. And then thankfully, and it was a really horrible meeting, hard for us all to swallow. And then we all went in there and saw him in ICU. It was the last time we were allowed in because that's when other patients started coming in. So his sister and I were like yelling at him through this door, like just, you know, hysterically crying, telling him to fight, telling him he's not done, telling him, you know, you got to come back. Come on. We know who you are. We know you can do this. He doesn't remember any of it, of course, but we thought at the time he had to have heard us somehow. And that was the last time. So we actually left not knowing if we'd ever see him again alive. And his sister on the way out, she looked at me and she said, he is not done. He's not done. He's not done. And so we both just looked at each other and we're like, nope, he's not done. So we would just say that to each other all the time because he wasn't, you know. So anytime it would get dark or anytime we'd get bad news, I'm sure you guys kind of heard what he went through, but you know, he was on dialysis. He had 4 collapsed lungs, which are called pneumothoraxes, where they had to put chest tubes in to kind of inflate his lungs. He got sepsis throughout his body. His fingertips were becoming, compromised and black and losing circulation. He had pulmonary embolisms. Yeah, those are his hands, which I'm sure you guys will probably get into at some point on this call. But he had pulmonary embolisms. He had blood clots. It was like temperatures, MRSA. It didn't matter. We'd get great news in the morning, and then it would just turn 3 hours later. Or we'd get bad news, and then it would turn. It was just this crazy roller coaster of fighting for his life and not being there for him, physically.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. So AJ, I have to ask you, how has this whole event and this everything that's going on in the world, how has it changed your perspective on COVID-19 and life, really? I mean, how has this affected you?
I'd say that as far as the way it's affected my life would be, I'm not a religious person. I definitely say I'm spiritual. I do meditate. I do a lot of mindfulness, a lot of mind building practices, that type of positivity. I've learned through this process how incredible positivity is, how important mindset is, how having high vibrations, how important that is, because it almost forces things away from you. Instead, when you're low and you're vulnerable in this kind of a place, it's like that's when things can kind of hurt you and happen. So we just made sure to raise it up as much as possible. So I've really begun to learn so much more about how important energy is, the love of a community. All of that was extremely powerful, whether it's prayer, whatever it might be for people, really to have faith in a bigger being than us.
Yeah.
How did you maintain that level of positivity? I mean, obviously, it sounds like the faith piece was something very strong for you, because as somebody, both Joe and I were recipients of. We were in the message chain. Yeah, we were in the message chain. So we were getting the daily, sometimes twice daily, sometimes every once in a while, maybe even three times daily update on his conditions. And I will tell you that if a day went by, we would all start shitting our pants. If a day went by with no message. But the tone of all of that communication was always very upbeat. It was very, very optimistic. How were you able to maintain that sort of demeanor? I've heard it said sometimes that sometimes you need to behave the way that you want to be, even if you don't feel that way. Was it a case of that?
I would say, as I mentioned, I have done a lot of reading, building of my mindset. I think mindset is everything. I think you have a choice every day to wake up and take on a day a certain way. If it starts a certain way, you have to do everything in your power to make it different, at least for yourself, even those things you can't control. And it's not easy. I'm not a guru in it, but I strongly believe in it. And we were carrying Gregg. We were carrying our village. We were carrying ourselves. And when you're carrying a weight like that, you have got to be someone that has the strength and the positivity and the insistence that this is going to be okay. Because if we didn't have that, it just wouldn't have worked, I don't believe, So I think so much of it is just positivity and mindset. I really, really, really do. And I'll tell you one other thing that I think is a really amazing bit of advice that I received, and it truly did change a lot of the way that I was dealing with it while we were going through it. A lot of times in these cases, when things happen to you, you ask the universe, why? Why me? Why universe? Why'd you pick us? Why Gregg, right? And someone I know who's also very well read in this type of mindset stuff was saying to me, instead of asking the universe why, ask the universe to show you what it can help you with. Because it is so powerful, ask the universe what miracle it can hand you. Ask it to show you all that it can provide. It's okay to ask it to help instead of be a victim to it. And that's what we did. So we just literally every morning asked the universe to show us how incredible it can be. And it did. So you can't measure any of it. I have no idea. None of it's tangible, but it definitely is powerful.
Well, one thing that's definitely undeniable is the large and powerful community that you guys had surrounding you guys was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen, AJ and Greg, your sister Stephanie, you guys did a remarkable job in carrying that weight, and really, listen, the optimistic text really helped all of us to stay optimistic. It resonated with the whole community, and it just kind of became this this kind of overwhelming sense that he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And it really started with your guys' mindset around everything and keeping everything positive. So I
Thank you
listen,
guys.
I thank you for
appreciate it.
that too, as well. I
Thank you so much.
Well.
And I think this is as much your story and as much a story about you and Stephanie and Miriam, you know, your mom, Greg, and all of the community members around you. It really is a story about all of you. And Greg was really the inciting, you know, event that created this whole other thing. So you guys,
I wanted to mention real quick, guys, because I'm going to have to jump, but you guys being dog lovers, Bear saved me, because it was, you know, it was a ride and a half, and Bear, in her silent, incredible, innate way, knew Stephanie and I needed her, and she was this silent force of love, and she was Greg, being Greg for us while he wasn't there. And it's incredible what animals can do, and she held her own. So I saved her life, but that girl,
she saved yours right back.
She did it tenfold for me too. So yeah,
and that's why we love
I believe
our
that
little friends.
Yeah, I believe that 100%. Thank you so much for sitting in with us, AJ. I know that you're busy and you've got some other things to attend to, but I think it's just as important to hear your side of the story as it is Greg's side of the story. And you know, it's a remarkable thing. Thank you so much for what you did for him, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Happy to.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, you.
AJ.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
She's an amazing human being, guys.
Clearly.
You are one lucky guy, my friend, in many, many ways.
You know, I'll tell you, and I think Joe actually said this, and that is that getting the messages on a regular basis with the context and the tone from which they were delivered, which was the positivity and the upbeat. And I mean, you and I talked last week, and I think that you said you went through and you looked back at a lot of those messages, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It was, you know, AJ looked at me and she said, is it okay? I mean, can you handle looking at this? And is it too soon? And I jumped in wholeheartedly, and I kind of wore it like a badge of courage, where I looked at it head on, and she and I sat down and went through every single update, every single text message, all the pictures, all the videos that were taken from the FaceTiming of me in ICU. I mean, we cried, we laughed. You know, there were just some amazing updates in regards to what transpired. And the laughing part was Stephanie and AJ dancing in their kitchen. You know, Stephanie moved in with AJ for 3 weeks, and every day they just, you know, they made a happy moment. And it just, we laughed about it. And that was so empowering. And the energy that was given out by each and every one of you, and you're part of this, man, both you guys. And it was felt on my end. And I believe that's what carried me through it.
And speaking of which, so you got intubated, and that really began 60 some days of a lot of stuff happening on our side of things, or on the world side of things. You were out. But to kind of go back through that checklist of things that happened to you, your lungs collapsed multiple times, and sepsis and pulmonary edemas and a lot of other things as well. Yeah. At what point did you begin to come out of this and see the light, so to speak?
You know, it's kind of interesting. When I did come out of it, I still didn't remember. And the proof of it was the videos that were taken of me, where I was communicating with AJ and Stephanie via FaceTime with my ICU nurse. And I really had no idea of what that was all about. When I was transferred out of quarantine into ICU, I was on the vent for 31 days. And so once that was done, I transferred to ICU for about 3 days, and then transferred up to a floor called 3 North, which is the unit that I recovered in. And that's probably one of the best units in the hospital. And so when AJ around my birthday had, come up and with Stephanie, I had ICU psychosis, and I was envisioning, I was in Manhattan Beach, I was in Utah, I was in Colorado, or I was all over the place, in Vegas, mind you. And then I was in one of my best friend's houses, and again, in my hospital bed, quote unquote, that this is a perception of mine. And my night nurse, this guy, big dude, was just, I call baby Huey, just a gentle guy, really nice guy, ended up letting couple's friends in the house. And they, in my mind, they killed my best friend, Richard, and my goddaughter. And I was under the impression that they tapped my phone, and they set up video cameras in my room where I was being monitored, and I couldn't tell AJ because I was in fear for her life. And that was just a crazy situation.
And how long did that go on, Greg, that you were in that kind of state of paranoia and psychosis?
I want to say about a week.
Oh my
it's
God.
about a week.
Oh, man.
And when AJ came in, I looked at her and I said, "How's Allison?" which is Richard's wife. And she said, "Well, she's fine." And I went, "Fine?" I'm like, "Well, what's up with Hannah, my goddaughter?" Being she's dead, mind you, in my mind.
Right.
And she goes, "She's great. And I talked to Richard this morning." And I just snapped out of it. And I really realized what was real and what was fantasy. So
Wow.
It literally at that particular point is where I really woke up completely and started moving forward.
Jeez. So that was after you'd obviously come out of your coma and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What day is this? We got day 45. We're at day 50.
What is that, babe? What day was it, like number wise?
Of getting out
Of when around my birthday. So around the 16th was day what?
your birthday was about the
40, 45th, something like that?
30,
Wow.
35th?
30th, yeah, 45th day, I think.
Something like that, around 40, 45 days.
Amazing.
Wow.
And then at what point did you have kind of a full grasp of the seriousness of the situation and your condition?
A couple days after that, I mean, I really kind of, looking down upon myself, having my hands in the situation they were, having every tube that's coming out of every flipping orifice of my body. I had a trach. I had multiple chest tubes coming out of my body. I was on oxygen. I mean, it was just nuts.
Right. And to reiterate, in case we didn't say this before, you found this out later that you had a 1%. They were considering you, the medical staff were considering that you had a 1% chance of survival.
It was actually less than, but yes.
That's
so my neurologist came in my room a latter part of my stay, a couple days before I was leaving, and you probably heard this mentioned on a couple of the interviews that I did in the past. She said, "You are an absolute miracle. In fact, medically speaking, you should not be here, like literally." And she said that your brain was 100%. And I laughed. I said, "That's fantastic," because it wasn't before. So we had a good laugh. We cried, but it was really a trip as far as my pulmonologist, said that if you go on a vent, you have a 70% mortality rate at day 1. Yeah. And day 10, it diminishes to around 1%. And so day 31, man, I shouldn't be here. I mean, really, medically speaking, I shouldn't be here. And the recovery being the fact that I had kidney failure, was put on dialysis, I had liver failure, my lungs and everything else being on the vent. I have 100% kidney function, I have 100% liver function, 100% cognitive brain function. My lungs will be 100%. There's a couple little scarring on my lower left lobe, but it's not going to hinder me in 100% recovery. It'll take 9 months for the lungs to recover, and it's definitely a slow process. And guys, I lost 50 pounds.
Yeah.
And Stacy will attest to it. The coronavirus is no diet to take. So don't jump on that bandwagon.
No.
No, it's not. It's not. Well, listen, look, I kind of want to talk to you about that. As far as you said, there was no medical reason why you should have been alive. But what do you say to the person? Because listen, I don't know if many people know, but just to kind of reiterate, your background was an athletic background. By all means, you should not have been in the situation that you were in.
Correct.
Considering the fact that you were so healthy, you were so fit, you ate really, really good and clean throughout years, and as long as I've known you, and it's been a while. So what do you say against that, as far as, because there's, you hear it all the time, which is the argument of, well, I'm healthy and I'm young, it's not going to be effective. It's going to be a flu, or it's going to be some sort of like cold, or I'm just going to be able to kind of rough it out.
The message that I'm kind of broadcasting with all the media that I've been doing is this virus is no joke. It does not discriminate. In fact, what happened to me, I had something that you call cytokine storm. And what cytokine storm does, I have a hyperimmune system, which is the best of the best as far as immune systems go. I've never been sick. Yeah, I got the flu every once in a while. I got a cold, 24 to 48 hours, it gets better. And I never really was, I had no underlying health issues at all. So 9 days into my exposure to the virus, 9 days to the day, I was told that cytokine storm hits. And what that does is it basically allows my great immune system to turn on me and actually shut down all my vital organs and fight against me. And that's what it did. It's not the most common of things, but it does happen, and it does happen to random people. I caught the short straw on this one. All 13 of my friends on my trip caught COVID, and it ranged from they ranged from ages of in their mid 40s to 81 years old, and that 81-year-old was asymptomatic. So it hits everybody differently, and nobody knows what could happen. And in fact, I'm the poster child for who it doesn't happen to, and it did.
Yeah. So there was really that, what did you call it? A cytokine swarm? Cytokine
storm.
That was just an anomaly. There were no pre-existing conditions that would have invited that sort of a response. Correct. No genetic predisposition toward Correct. Any of that. Correct. So that's really interesting. What Joe's talking about is physically fit. Were you 53 when it happened, or were you 52 and turned 53, or 54?
53 and turned 54?
All right. Well, you get to wind it back a year.
Why are you laughing, Joe?
Well, you'll notice I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing one bit.
Hey, Joe, youth is wasted on the young, brother. Come on.
Listen, I am officially telling you that you get to wind it back, because if you experience a birthday in the middle of COVID, it doesn't count.
It's a do-over?
It's a do-over.
Okay.
But you do not fit the profile for somebody that is typically extremely affected by COVID-19. What is interesting to take a look at now that we are several months into this coronavirus pandemic experience is that it feels like there is a relaxing of vigilance on the part of a lot of people. And some of that is very understandable. And, you know, I don't envy the government officials having to make decisions where they're balancing public health with the economy and all of those things. It's a tough role to be in, and I wouldn't want to be in that. But I do become concerned that the vigilance is being lessened. Do you have concern about that? Do you see from where you're sitting what you feel might be a relaxed sense of safety or a false sense of security at this point in the coronavirus epidemic or pandemic?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, when you start watching all the protesters, and I'm a big proponent on what these protesters are representing. They have the right to speak. They have a right for change. Things do need to change, and they've been making everybody aware of that. What has happened is it's overshadowed the front runner, which is COVID, which is potentially going to kill anybody that it comes in contact with. The potential of, there's 40% of people are out there are not asymptomatic.
Right.
And, there's been conflicting news of, if you're asymptomatic, you can't transmit the virus. It's completely false. And there was something that was brought up yesterday, as a matter of fact, that one of the major players in disease control validated that absolutely, if you're infected with COVID, asymptomatic or not, you can transmit.
Yeah.
Right. So people have the right to live their life as they choose, and there's no negating that. But you don't have the right to put other people at risk. In that is an irresponsible individual. They hold the banner of I'm not wearing a mask, but it's not for you. It's for somebody else that you should wear the mask, because you don't know if you have it or not. You don't know unless you've been tested. If you have the antibodies test and you come back positive, you immediately should go ahead and take the COVID test, because do you have it now or did you have it before? So, right. If you're opening the country, if businesses are opening, just as an individual, be responsible, and we'll mitigate a lot of the transmissions out there, because now there is spikes in COVID patients. Their fear is there's not enough beds in the hospital right now.
Yeah.
Right.
So people
on the way in, I was hearing Arizona's in trouble. The governor of Arizona came in and was like, we opened up too early. We opened up too early, too fast. They had 1,200 cases just today. So
right.
You're seeing that all over slowly, but it's troubling.
I think it comes down to like a common battle, which is personal liberties versus community liberties. And there's an old saying that the right of one man to swing his fist ends where another man's nose begins. And I think that kind of speaks in particular to the issue of masks, for example, wearing masks, which is a kind of a hotly contested issue. And it's an emotional issue right now, because it feels like an infringement. It feels like an invasion of people's personal liberties to be expected to wear a mask in public. And I can understand that. It's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable, and all of that. For me, what I'm seeing in the data and in the research is that when we're all wearing masks, and the masks are really meant to suppress the exhalation of all of these diseased particulates. And if we can reduce the amount of particulates that we are all exhaling into a shared space, then we reduce, number one, the risk of contraction, and we reduce the viral load that we take in the event that we do get infected. If the number of particulates in the air is lower, there's a lower viral load, which will correlate to a lower, or I think it's said that it correlates to a less extreme case of the disease. But how do you feel about kind of like the personal responsibility aspect of that, or wearing masks and the importance of wearing masks? with the understanding that obviously you're not a medical expert, that's not your background, but you've got personal experience as the recipient of this disease. How do you see our responsibility as individuals when it comes to wearing face masks?
I think it's mandatory that we do it. You know, the problem I have is the government hasn't been responsible in its own right. You've got the police and the fire department in these protests not wearing masks. They're not representing, you know, what it means to be safe. And, you know, there's a lot of people that really are rebelling against it. You know, the bottom line is this, guys. You know, I took it in the chin with a baseball bat. And, you know, do you want to risk your kid? It's what if your kid gets it? I don't even care about you. What if your kid gets it? And is it worth just the inconvenience of not wearing the mask? It's like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I mean, Joe, your kids, do you really want to jeopardize it? You guys have been adamant about protecting yourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. And that's my biggest fear.
It's a fear worth having.
Right.
Because we don't have a vaccine for it. So if you get it, it's a roll of the dice on how hard you're going to get it. So do you become that 20% that gets on a ventilator? Because if you get on a ventilator, dude, I had a 1% chance of survival. That means you probably won't make it. Every person that was contacting me and AJ through social media that is all around the country that said, my husband is in the hospital on a vent. My dad was on a hospital on the vent. They died. 100% of them died. I was the statistic that I had as of a week ago was of 300 plus patients admitted to St. Joe's. Of everyone that was on that vent, not all 300, but of everyone that was on that vent, I am the only patient to walk out. The only one. That leads someone to believe if you catch it and you go down that path, you probably won't survive. That's staggering.
Yeah.
It's not worth taking that chance.
Listen, the scary, it was always been scary for me. And I've always been worried about contracting and stuff like that. But when I heard your story, and even now, when you talk about your hyperimmunity things, when you talk about your previous history of colds and flus, and you probably got it for 24 hours, 48 hours, that's my history. I've never been sick longer than a day or two. I can't remember ever being in a situation where I had to take off of work for being sick. The first thing that went through my mind when I heard this hyperimmunity condition that I've never heard about before, that actually nailed it in the coffin for me as far as, you know, if I wasn't scared before, that actually scared the living crap out of me, because I was like, oh my God, how do you get tested for that? Like, how do you even know if you have a hyperimmune system? Is that just like a roll of the die and stuff? And that was really kind of, I was always cautious. I always wore a mask even on my runs, and I have a really quiet neighborhood. I'm not running around a lot of people at all, if I see anybody at all, but I'm running with the mask on. Now more than anything, I mean, from here to the gym, and my car is probably 10, 15 feet away. I'm wearing masks before I exit out the door till I get in the car. And then that's the only time I ever take it off. The only time I have it off is when nobody's in the room, like right now, or in my own house. And that's just, listen, I always walk around the person that's not wearing the mask type of thing, because it scares me. I don't know. Like,
and guys, like, I have the antibodies, so it's very unlikely for me to catch it again. Now, if it hasn't been proven 100%, meaning, you know, other strains of the virus, potentially you can get it and so forth. So I'm protecting myself as well. But I'm the most unlikely person to get it again. I don't want to do that again, of being the most unlikely person getting it hit again.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question, because there are a lot of people that are starting to kind of be like, oh, I had it when I was in December. I had it in January. and
Yes.
they've gone out and they've gotten antibody tests. I was going to ask you, how much precaution are you taking now that you have gotten the antibody test? And what do you say to the person that has gotten the antibody test and is it a free pass? You know,
No, it's not a free pass because the antibody test is only good for that day. You expose yourself to somebody else that afternoon, you can get COVID. So, you know, I always, you know, anybody that I come around is a requirement to be tested in the recent months. And do they have the right protocol in their life that I'm willing to mitigate that risk?
Right.
And that's what I've done. I mean, I've, you know, around people that really have the right protocol, the same protocol you do.
Right.
Guys, could I step away for 1 second? I just have to deal with something real quick. Give me 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Go for it.
So that's a really interesting thing about the antibody test because, listen, I hear it all the time right now. It's like people are, and I want to ask Gregg when he comes back, people are taking this kind of almost chickenpox approach where as I've got it, I'm good to go. Let's go to Coachella. Where are my concert tickets?
Yeah,
you know?
I was even a little concerned that people might. This is completely made up in my imagination.
Yeah, personal opinion.
I was just a little concerned that people might actually not be convinced that it was as serious as it is, and almost intentionally expose themselves so that they could just, like you say, kind of take the chickenpox approach. Get through it, get over it, and have immunity to it, which feels a little bit like Russian roulette, number one. And number two, I don't know that that research has convincingly demonstrated that you can't have a relapse. I don't know that, but I think that is a question that has not yet been convincingly answered.
Well, how can it be? You know, like we're talking about a virus that's not even a year old.
It's new.
You know? Yeah, it's brand new. It's novel. I was telling Stacy really early on, I said, mark my word, you're going to see COVID-19 parties. And she's like, what the hell is that? I'm like, remember as a child, when anybody got chicken pox, your parents were like, oh, I'm bringing him over so he can get it and just be done with it. And my fear is that there's going to be this kind of scenario where people get it and they start inviting people over that want to get it just done and over with because they think that they're going to ride it out like a flu or a cold, get the antibodies and not have to go through all these safety measures that we're having to go through when it comes to even going to the supermarket and getting, you know, oranges or a gallon of milk or something, so that can just mitigate all those just nuisances that they're finding that they have to do, washing the hands and stuff like that every time you come into contact with something. So that's my fear. That's my fear that starts to happen because there is no science that, you know, number one, if you get it, it's going to treat you like a flu. And that if you do contract it and you have the antibodies, that you all of a sudden have this free reign to go out and do whatever you want in life. And that's just not the case.
Well, and there's just too much that we don't know. And, you know, the whole testing issue is a challenging one as well. I was telling you earlier that Melina and I are scheduled to go have a test tomorrow afternoon. And there's a part of me going, I don't know the value in that except to know if I have it. I have no symptoms. I have no reason to believe that I'm sick, because if I'm exposed to it the next day, I get it then. You know, so the testing issue is kind of a conundrum to determine, you know, probably it's much more valuable to get tested if you're showing symptoms so that you can actually.
Right. Well, listen, I went this morning and got my antibody test done. So I'm like, you know, refreshing my email all the time to see if I got my test back results and stuff like that. But me and Stacy went this morning and we got it and stuff. And I don't know. I think it's more valuable getting more information on a regular basis. It can't hurt, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
being
it can
aware
hurt.
of the situation. I think it's much more dangerous to walk around town not knowing or not taking the simple. It took me 10 minutes. It's a 10-minute, scenario where they
Yeah,
go in, they take your blood, they do the swab, and you're out. If that. And I'm being generous with 10 minutes because I was in and out of there.
yeah,
So it's an interesting scenario too, because my fear is, and Greg, you're just stepping in, but we were talking about the antibody tests
Mm-hmm.
and people taking more of my fear is that people will start to take more of an approach like chickenpox, where it's like they're just kind of trying to be around people that have had it or known have it so that they can contract it, deal with it, get it over with, get their antibodies, and then they can go live their life the way they were living it 6 months
Mm-hmm.
ago.
risky.
That could be a real scenario going into the next couple months if it's not happening already.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely concerning. There's I'm conflicting. Am I more concerned with the person that had tested positive for antibodies and now is going out to the raves and concerts, or am I more concerned about the person that's not testing or not doing anything and not showing any type of symptoms and walking around? It's kind of like this conundrum now, but it's an interesting problem.
Hey,
to say the
Greg,
least.
Greg, I wanted to pivot for a second and then circle back maybe at the very end with any sort of kind of, final words and final thoughts and that kind of thing. But I wanted to circle back because I wanted to ask you to tell the story about standing up when you were leaving the hospital.
Um,
So and to set the stage, anybody who's seen the video of Gregg leaving the hospital knows that there was just an enormous audience of staff members, medical staff members applauding him as he left. And it was an amazing send-off. But then when you and I were talking last week, you told me the story about standing up, and I love it. So I wanted to ask you to tell that.
so the entire hospital never had a celebration of leaving the hospital that they did with me, and that's an absolute honor. When I was being interviewed by a girlfriend of mine who was allowed to come in the hospital with camera crews, and she's involved heavily with nursing in her background, and was doing kind of an interview documentary, if you will, and she was setting up the camera would follow me out in the wheelchair, getting in the elevator, coming down. When the elevator opened, the first hallway was lined on both sides with over 100 people of the staff members that were cheering me along, and I was bawling my guts out. It was just an amazing thing to turn left into the atrium. That area had double, if not triple, the amount of people. There were 200-300 people in there inside the hospital. My friends were outside. Only the hospital members were inside. And so I wheeled into the center of the atrium, and I saw the row of my doctors all side by side, and I fist bumped them, and I spun around with my wheelchair and acknowledged each and every person. I looked up, and on the second floor, they were looking over the second floor balcony, and those guys were cheering at me, and it was surreal. In fact, I was supposed to walk out with a walker. And again, I'm very emotional about this. I cry every time I talk about it. Stephanie and AJ were on either side of me. And I just reached down and locked my wheels. Damn, I could get to every time this is emotional. And I just looked at the girls and went, grab an arm. And I stood up and I walked out on my own. And I walked out into over 100 of my friends and every fucking news crew that was out there with the camera stuck in my face. And it was just a celebration of success, of not only of my success, but the success of the staff of the hospital. I was the first person in and I was the first person out. And unfortunately, I'm the only person out
Yeah.
that walked out in that respect. Now, there's other people that have left that have been alive, but nursing homes, amputations, things like that. I'm going to have amputations on my fingers, but that's a small price to pay for my life back. And I will do everything that I've done in the past. I'll be skiing, I'll be golfing, I'll be racing cars, I'll be riding motorcycles, I'll be riding mountain bikes.
That's awesome.
There's no stopping me for what I'm going to achieve.
I love that, and I love that story of you standing up. And I think it's important to note that you've gone through an unbelievable ordeal, and you're not out of the woods yet. You still have things that you need to deal with. So what does life look like moving forward? What are some of the challenges that you still have to face?
It's the everyday things right now. I've got my independence taken away from me. Will come back. But there's certain restrictions because of, my hands and a couple of my toes. I have what we call peroneal neuropathy, which is a compressed nerve on my right foot. It's to the right of my knee that it hinders my ability to lift my foot up, my toes. The greatest example is I can get in a car and I can push the accelerator really fast, but I can't take my foot off the accelerator. So
it's a little ironic, isn't it? It kind of sounds a little bit like you, Greg.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's definitely.
So no driving the Porsche. No driving the Porsche anytime soon.
All accelerator.
Porsche anytime soon.
All accelerator, no brakes.
Exactly. It's how I really live my life. But
yeah, it is.
I've been forced to take a little bit of a step back. I've been forced to acquire some more patience than I ever have. Being the fact that my body is writing checks, my lungs can't cash yet. I have as you guys know, I have a big presence in Mammoth. I have a home there. I spend a lot of time up there, and kind of my second group of family is there. That just a ton of friends that I share a lot of time with, and I can't go to the altitude right now. So when my peroneal neuropathy will heal itself probably in 6 to 9 months, my lungs will heal themselves in 9 months plus. So it's, going into surgery, starting a week from tomorrow. My first hand surgery will be my left hand. I'll start on. It's taking the black off my hands. This is my least affected hand. So the black will come off. We will determine what viable tissue is still there. They'll do something called A-cell, which is stem cells, which is a pig bladder that goes on the end of your fingers that will help rejuvenate tissue as much as possible. There's no promises, but there's hope that there's a lot to be regenerated, and we'll see how that plays out, and that will determine what the next steps are for my hands and what's going to be amputated on this hand, as well as approaching the second one, which will probably be 6 to 8 weeks after that. So I've got back-to-back surgeries that will end up happening. I'm a little scared as far as, what's on the other side of the unknown, but at the end of the day, I'll kick ass. I've got no question about that.
I don't think anybody has any question about whether or not you're going to kick ass, my friend.
Thanks,
I have
buddy.
no doubt you're going to come back stronger, and I'm going to see some videos of you skiing and motorcycle riding soon enough. That's for sure.
I'm definitely going to drag your ass up there, dude.
I know you are. I was going to say, I was like, I got to go to Mammoth now. I got to go.
Yep. The price you got to pay.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And speaking of the price that you've got to pay, you've racked up some enormous medical bills, and you've gotten some help with that. But that's been a challenge. As it makes perfect sense. There was a tremendous amount of medical attention paid to you, and every penny worth it.
Yeah, it's in excess of, I will say, 2 weeks ago. I actually added up the bills as of 2 weeks ago, which there's more coming in. It's over $1.7 million currently. and there's a ton of surgeries to take place. The prosthetics that I am selecting is the Ferrari of prosthetics. We're looking into Germany of the technology that they have, and that's over $100,000 and for one of the prosthetics that is going to happen in my right hand. So there's a lot of expenses on that I've had. There's a lot more coming. My sister created that GoFundMe that is a tremendous head start in covering a lot of what is needed. I have home care 7 days a week. That is probably close to $18,000 a month of expenses. It's just crazy at
Wow.
what's transpiring. But money's money, and it can always make more. And the fact is I got my life back, and the support of you guys and everybody else that's around, and I don't take that lightly. I love everyone for it, and I had over 1,200 people donate to my cause. I don't care if you donated $5. I love you all the more because you took time out of your day to think of me and to be selfless. And I just appreciate everybody.
That's amazing, man. Well, listen, man, we love you. We're going to do everything in our power to support you and keep on speaking the word as far as like getting the safety precautions out there and telling people how serious of an issue this is. And you're an inspiration to us all, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today to sit down with us and actually go over and tell your story, because it's a remarkable story. It's a story that needs to be told over and over and over and over again. I know you're probably sick of telling it yourself, but we need to hear it.
It really helps in dealing with what's in front of me right now. And it also is so empowering and again, I'm putting it back on you guys. The support and the love that you guys give, and you guys are everybody. I mean, it's everybody that is I call it in my village. And I can't fail because of you guys. I'm not allowed to. It's when I go dark, I can't go dark. It's you bring me right back. And it's really an empowering thing, and the love is heard, it's appreciated, and I couldn't make it through it without you guys.
Yeah, and it all goes back to that first nurse who said, "Not on my watch. I ain't gonna let you die." And you're paying that back just by being alive, paying it back to all of us just for being alive. On Saturday, we're going to do a little bit of yoga in your honor. Joe, do you have any details about that, or can we post it on the comment section?
Yeah, we'll post a link as far as the yoga. I just posted a link to the GoFundMe page in the comment section. But yeah, we're going to be doing a fundraiser for Gregg at 10 a.m., taking some of the Kickstarters through a yoga session. And we're just going to be in your honor and sitting and really remembering and kind of thinking about the journey that you went through and the journey that you're about to go through. And you're going to be in our thoughts and prayers for a long time, man. And I'm happy to see you. And listen, as soon as my antibody test comes in, my COVID test, tequila's on me, man.
Damn right, baby.
Gregg, final thoughts, brother. Final thoughts.
So final thoughts, just be socially responsible. I mean, we're in a scary time right now, and things are opening up. Life's getting back to its new normal, and just be socially responsible of protecting others. Don't even bother about protecting yourself. Protect others. Protecting yourself falls into that category. It just is innate in that respect. But just take care of everybody else, and that'll take care of you.
Perfect.
Great message, man.
We love you, brother, and thank you so much for spending time. I mean, personally, for Joe and me, just spending your time with us. It means a lot to us personally. Thank you for speaking to the community. Thank you for being a message that needs to be heard, and being an example, and being willing to be an example, and being willing to kind of be vulnerable and warts and all on that. It's necessary. It's important. And like Joe said, it matters. So thank you very much.
Hey, man, it's more than appreciated.
All right, brother. Have a good day. We will talk to
too,
you soon. Have a good
Thank
week.
you so much, Greg.
Love you guys
man.
and everybody watching too.
Love you too.
Love
Stay
you.
well. Stay well, man.
See you, buddy.